is great to be here today for Zoom into Books, which is, as we all know who have been on this show and who have watched it, is powered by Headline Books, who is one of the top independent publishers located in the United States. And this is really exciting for me because I get to talk today to an old friend, a new friend, and about a book that just absolutely fallen in love with. Courthouse, Ron Adams is going to be here. We're going to talk with him about his new book, Coal Mine to Courtroom. It's a great book. Now, before I get into Ron and Fred doing this, let me kind of give a little background on this book. You look at this book, and it's a story of a young man who is coming out of the coal mines, has a horrible, horrendous accident, and then moves on to a career. Now, a lot of times you think, okay, that's a biography. I'm going to listen to the biography of Ron Adams. Why do I want to read this biography? And Ron, I got to tell you, after reading this book, this is not a biography. This is, in fact, a how-to book. This is a book of inspiration, a book of perseverance, a book of how to go about life for everyone, that everyone can sit down and read. Everybody can come up with an idea on. Everybody can see this. I got to tell you, the reviews have been spectacular. Kirkus reviews, remarkably inspirational. Midwest Book Review, a testimony to resilience, perseverance, and re-envisioning the future. I got to tell you, Ron, Fred, welcome to the family of Headline Book authors, and welcome to Zoom into Books. It is great to be here with everybody, with all of you today, and all the folks who are watching, not only live, but are going to be watching later on the internet. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for as we go forward on this.
And before we get started, Rick, I just want to say one thing. I'm sitting here reading this book.
Well, you dusted off an old copy of an old book. There you go.
This is one of your best books, Rick. I love your writing. You're a great author.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this
conversation with you.
Now,
thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks, Ron. Great to be here. Hey, let me start with kind of, I think we would normally start this story and do it in a chronological order, but I don't want to, because I think the chronological order of this and the childhood that you have and the injury that you had doesn't define Ron Adams.
No,
so let's start with what defines Ron Adams. First off, give me a little background of why did you want to write this story down? Why did you want to put this thing in the paper?
Well, I actually battled internally with me and the good Lord on that, because my honest feeling was I hadn't done anything that remarkable. And I realized that sounds like somebody digging for a compliment, but I did what I had to do to live and to have a life. And so I realized that I don't quit and I moved forward in life well. But I only did because the alternative was so bad. So it was God pushing me to do it. And I finally, I delayed for a couple of years. But I'm glad I wrote it. I've run into a lot of people that were encouraged by the book. And that's the reason I wrote it, was to, if someone could read my story and see the things I had to overcome, then they could maybe do the same thing as well.
And that's what I love about this book, Ron, is that, you don't have to be in a wheelchair to find inspiration and guidance in this book. I have to tell you that in reading, for instance, chapter 21, and I have it open here, about starting your second year in law school after nearly quitting in your first year of law school. Now,
yeah,
I nearly did the same thing. and I'm looking at this going, yeah, I should have known Ron then, because he probably could have helped me in my second year get through it. You know, so I look at these things, and again, it's not something that I find that is just for people who are going through a physical hardship, but a mental hardship as well.
Yeah, well, and as you know, law school was a mental hardship, and it was a fight against all odds for me, because I didn't really believe I was the strongest student ever entered. Let's put it that way. But again, perseverance, and if you don't quit in life, most people will be successful.
Well, we had so many of our classmates that went to Chase that were on, you know, whatever year we were in, that didn't come back on year 2 or didn't come back on year 3.
Right.
I had to laugh though, because for me, you were talking about quoting some scripture from Mark, starting how it became inspirational for you in your second year, and I remember thinking that several Bible verses were inspirational to me at that time. And my thought back at the time was that, you know, looking at scripture for me was the last refuge of a scoundrel, you know, trying to get out of law school. So I'm glad that you had better use for that than I did. Hey, before we move on to the story, I want to introduce a guy who has been a friend of mine for a long time. The guy who you ended up having help write this book with you. Fred Anderson. Fred, again, welcome to the family of Headline Book Authors. Welcome to this program. It is hard to look at somebody else's story, and as a writer, I've experienced this myself, and be able to write in that person's voice. You know, voice is very important to the author. You don't want it to come across as if you can see the places that Fred Anderson helped Ron write this book, but it's seamless to me. It really is. For your first venture into published authordom, besides being a journalist, I was very impressed with that. How did you become associated with Ron, and how did you get involved in this project?
Well, I've known Ron since 2008. I was working as I still am, as a public relations consultant, and a mutual friend of ours who was working at Ron's law firm at the time asked if I would help create a brochure. My role in creating the brochure for the law firm back in 2008 was simply to write a 2-page mini biography of Ron. And so as I got to know Ron, talking to him about his life, I was just blown away by what he had accomplished, considering all the challenges that he had gone through in his life, growing up in a poor family with an abusive, alcoholic father, and I'm sure you'll get into that in a little bit. And not to mention the devastating accident in the coal mine that left him paralyzed. And as I was trying to write that 2-page mini biography, I was just frustrated because I couldn't fit as much information into it as I wanted to. So years later, when Ron asked me to collaborate with him on this memoir, I was glad to have a lot more pages to work with so that we could fit so many of the interesting anecdotes, not just the major issues, but some of the minor, you know, in some cases, funny things that had happened to him in his life.
Yeah, we ran into a bunch of that, didn't we, Fred?
That's right. And in fact, when Ron asked me if I would be willing to help him with the book, I said yes, on one condition: if we can make it not funny in a comical sense, but I wanted to include a lot of the funny things that have gone on in Ron's life. He has a great sense of humor. You know, Ron, this is one of the reasons I was instantly attracted to him as a friend. He doesn't go around feeling sorry for himself. He's very positive, very optimistic. He's just a kind, generous person, and he's very funny and just great to just hang out with. And so I wanted that aspect of his personality to come through in the book. And of course, he agreed, and I figured he would, because
one of the things about that, Ron, let's jump to this. I've known Fred forever. I met you at the Southern Kentucky Book Festival, and I think the one thing that I walked away from that meeting with is that a lot of times when you meet somebody who is bound to a wheelchair, there is that uncomfortableness in the introduction, and I felt none of that when I met Ron Adams. Ron, it was, well, now I have to admit, it was seamless, because we talked about his favorite thing and one of my favorite things, and that is hoops.
Yes.
We talked about University of Kentucky basketball and how much we were disappointed in the current season.
Yeah.
But
Well,
an early part of your life, right, is defined by basketball. As you look at it, when you look at 0 to 19, let's talk about that before the accident. Let's talk a little bit about that. You were quite the ball player.
Well, it was just a love I had for the game. And I mean, I'd play on a weekend 9 or 10 hours every day. And on the week when I was in school, I would finish varsity practice when we weren't playing games. And then I'd go home, eat a bite, and go out and play at dark. So I just loved to play. I really did.
So and you not only played in high school, but you played in college. You were a college ball player before the accident. You were playing at now it's College of the Cumberlands. No, it was College of the Cumberlands.
Cumberland College.
College.
No, it's University of the Cumberlands.
University of the Cumberlands.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the main thing, and when I was playing in high school, was I wanted to have a winning team. And so where I was playing in Dawson Springs was a really small school. And as you know, there weren't classes, school sizes, competition-wise. So we had 200 students in our high school, and we were playing 4,000 student high schools.
So you were a single A high school, and you were playing 4As.
Right, all day, every day. That's all. There wasn't anybody. There probably weren't 3 schools in the region that were our size.
Right.
Because 200 students is just small. In fact, the first year before I moved there, they were 1 in 28, 13. And so I wanted to make sure we were winners. So my junior and senior year, I started 81 games in a row at varsity, but my junior and senior year, we won 40 games in 2 years. So that was really great. Plus, I averaged about 25 points a game, 9 rebounds, 9 assists. So I was almost averaging a triple double back in the day when
you were the Oscar Robertson of Dawson Springs.
Yes, I was big fish in that pond. That pond.
By the way, if I could, I don't know if we specified at the beginning of the conversation that we're talking about Western Kentucky. We may have, but I don't remember. But yeah, Ron grew up in Dawson Springs in Western Kentucky, and he's talking about the time that he spent at Dawson Springs High School.
Yeah.
So as you think about Dawson Springs and you think about the time before the accident, you had a family life that wasn't ideal. That's part of what led up to what went on. Give us a little thought about that.
Well, I grew up in Uniontown, a really small little town, even further west in Western Kentucky. And my father was an alcoholic, and he worked in the coal mines, and we were like so many families at that time. He was poor, we were poor. We and he just he was stuck in the pattern of working and drinking when he wasn't at work, and so it was a pretty volatile. Anyone that's ever been reared around alcoholism, because people are volatile when they drink. So you never knew what was going to cause him to fly off the handle. And I was afraid a lot of my childhood. And also, he would hit on my mother and things, and that just was really bad.
So when you go to college, you're playing basketball. Your first season there, you have an ankle injury, and now you got to come home to sit out for a little while for the summer.
Right.
This is where life takes a. As with all of us, we have a moment in life that makes a turn in our life. This is the turn for Ron Adams. You're in the coal mines, and you have a debilitating injury that happens.
Yes.
What does a 19-year-old kid think when suddenly they're looking at their future in a wheelchair?
Well, it's devastating. There's just not any way to sugarcoat that. I think the worst thing for me being a 19-year-old, I didn't even understand a spinal cord injury, what it was. I remember when I was being injured, I remember popping and cracking sounds of my neck. And I thought I'm getting hurt bad. And my idea of getting hurt bad was an ankle injury,
Right.
nothing like this. So it wasn't until about 30 days after the accident that doctors took me out in the pavilion area and started telling me all these things that I wasn't ever going to do, like I was never going to be any better. And the bad thing is I'd lost 55 pounds in 30 days.
Wow.
So I couldn't feed myself, and I was having to be turned every 2 hours at night. And for them to go, that's as good as it's going to be, we need hope. And that's why I wrote the book, because at that moment, they took my hope away for just that short moment. And
so how does, that's the first thing that you overcome. You become aggressive about your future later, but how do you, so you get through how did you get through that? How did you, I know that's when you started listening to the Bible. You started having people post scriptures, things of that nature. Is that when the faith started pulling through of going that there's a future here?
Yes. Well, I always felt close to the Lord, but there was a time in my teenage years it just seemed like all my friends that were in church, we were just all going through the motions. After the accident, and obviously when you're very desperate, that's the first thing you do is seek God more than ever. And it was like, and I believe that I would be healed. Now, I believe that now. The only difference in believing it and what the doctors were worried about is I was just going to sit and wait for God to zap me. And I never intended on that. But I believe everyone needs hope that tomorrow will be better. So I put up on my wall, or have people put on my wall, scriptures in the hospital, and that just made the doctors more sure I was crazy. So in fact, that's how I got to the psychiatrist evaluation. So
So when did you get to the point that saying, wait a minute, this is not the end of my life, I can move forward, and even to the point of, maybe I can get a degree and go to law school?
Well, the first night the doctor told me, or the first day they told me that night I cried all night. And that morning when I woke up, it was very real that nothing had changed. I was still a quadriplegic, but now my face and eyes hurt. And so I decided at that moment, I'm not going to ever do anything that doesn't get me a result. So crying didn't make it better. So from then on, I was going to, every fork I came to in life, I was going to take the best of the two choices every time and see where that got me. And then when I started going to college, I didn't start to go to college to get 4 degrees or to practice law. I started to see if I could even go and take classes, because I wasn't a real great student because I didn't try in high school. And, you know, I had a lot of obstacles. You have a lot of problems when you're a quadriplegic, bladder, bowel, sitting. So I just went to college to see if I could go one semester. That's how I started.
You know, I think what is interesting about that, and Fred, I'm going to jump back to you in a minute. I actually had a question, but it's actually spurred something else in that in reading the book, the one thing that dawned on me was our age.
Right.
But when you were going to college, and this is not that we're both old, although we both have a tint of gray hair at different places
Yes,
around us. Fred's jealous that we just have hair. But Ron, this is all happening before, and this will, you know, if there's a young person watching this or someone who is under 50 watching this, this is before the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is before we had ramps in the sidewalk. This is before we had handicapped bathrooms that were mandated by law, the things that came about in the mid 80s to late 80s under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we're not talking about the obstacles even that you have today. They are even greater because nothing has been adapted at that point to folks that are in wheelchair. Am I right there?
Absolutely. Well, there weren't even accessible doors. So when you're a quad and you're facing all of that, it was very daunting. I honestly thought, well, I'll try. We'll see what happens for this first semester. And it was a challenge, but I found myself having a new outlet to focus my energies on. And all of a sudden, I went from a very mediocre student to a really good student, because it's amazing how much you can learn if you read the material a couple of times. So anyway, you know, you go from you didn't read it at all to you read it twice and you're brilliant. So, you know, and and from that first semester, I made all A's, and then I was like, wow, I can do this. So then I went to get my 2-year degree that would transfer to Murray State. So each step of the way, I kept advancing I was actually broadening my expectations and my hopes. So,
you know, let me switch to Fred a minute, because this is where the story changes. This is why this book is so great. This is where the story changes, and it's the triumph of Ron Adams in this case. But Fred, from 0 to 20 for Ron Adams is to some degree emotionally draining. When you're helping him write that part of the story, how are you getting the emotion across and not just, you know, in the words of Hemingway, bleeding all over the paper? Because it comes through in a positive manner, and maybe that's just Ron's persona, but it had to be, you know, when I wrote, helped Landau, Eugene Murphy, write his book about coming up through and winning America's Got Talent, and his background of his kids. He was actually a coal miner's son, also, Ron. You know, that time frame that I'm writing about his youth was listening to the stories and trying to transcribe that. That was absolutely draining to me. Did you find the same thing?
I wouldn't say draining. I think if we had focused exclusively on the negative aspects of Ron's life, yes, that would be draining. But that's, you know, we wanted to strike a balance and include, again, a lot of the humor, a lot of the, not necessarily the humor, but just some of the more positive aspects of what he lived through. And certainly you were asking, I think, specifically about his years, his childhood years and teenage years before the accident. Yeah, he grew up in a challenging home environment. I mean, a bad home environment, as far as it was a very poor, a poor family with a very difficult father. But as Ron writes in the book, he had a great relationship with his mother and his two older sisters. And that was really what I think Ron acknowledges in the book. That's part of what kept him balanced, I guess, as a younger person. And then when basketball came along, you know, as Ron says in the book, basketball was an escape from a home life that sucked. That was his way out. He was looking at basketball as the way out of this poor environment and on to bigger and better things. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Rick. But
well, I just think it's.
Well, I did want to ask Ron, during the whole process of interviewing him about his childhood, I wanted to get beyond just the horrible stuff, and so I started asking him about just interesting little things that weren't negative.
The pranks he and his teammates on the basketball team played.
Well, yes, and that was a different line of questions, and since you brought that up, I will say those anecdotes, those specific anecdotes about the pranks that almost got Ron in trouble, not only with his school but the law, those almost didn't make it into the book because I didn't even know about those until late in the process. We had almost finished the first draft. We may have even finished the first draft of the book. And as I read it over and over, it just occurred to me that Ron came across as too good. There was nothing in his life where he changed from or learned a lesson from, you know, being a bad person or doing something bad and then learning a lesson and becoming better. There wasn't that kind of transition. And I said, Ron, didn't you ever do anything bad in your life? Did you ever get into a fight when you were a kid and learn a lesson? And he said, no. I said, did you ever steal anything as a kid? Did you shoplift a candy bar at the local store and then get caught and learn a lesson? No, you never did that. And I said, well, didn't you do anything? Wasn't there anything where you got in trouble ever in your life?
You couldn't get into trouble in Dawson Springs because everybody knows you. So is the first thing. I've been to Dawson Springs.
But there's only 12 people and 2 cats and a dog. So.
Well, but that's where those stories came from. Ron, I had to like pull them out of him. At the end, I specifically said, Ron, think about something where you got in trouble. And those were the 2 stories that he came up with. And I don't know if we want to get into the details in this interview. It kind of
I want to make sure that people don't get the chance to read this book. They can figure out those stories.
There were a couple of times. And it's in the chapter called "Boys Will Be Boys." We'll tell you that it's in the chapter called "Boys Will Be Boys." Ron writes about 2 specific experiences where he and some of his basketball teammates played pranks.
My life of crime started. Yeah, that's when I got into the slammer. I'm just kidding.
No, almost,
But
almost.
Yeah,
Remember we don't want to say, but you almost got arrested, Ron. Remember?
yeah.
So
Well, you don't want the principal of the school calling you to the office because the sheriff's waiting on you. You don't want that.
hey, Ron, let's move the a little forward here. And now you go and you suddenly decide, okay, this school thing I was working out for me. There's difficulties. There's things that I'm doing of having trouble getting around, things like that. But school's working for me. You get your degree from Murray. Who first mentions to you? When did your first idea come into your mind? Oh, maybe I'll go to law school. How did that come about?
Well, the first time it was ever discussed was when I was in rehab with the scriptures on the wall, and the doctor said, this guy is not coping, and he's a little bit of a nut, I think. Now, they didn't tell me I was a nut, but when they tell me I need to be seen by a psychiatrist, you figure it out. So I went in, saw the psychiatrist, took a bunch of tests, and that's when the psychiatrist said, well, I don't see anything wrong with you. In fact, I think you have the intellectual capacity to go to law school if you wanted. So that was the first time I ever heard it. Then a good friend of mine who is a circuit court judge in Hopkins County, where I'm from, where Dawson's located, David Massmore, he came up and told me I ought to go to law school, and he was practicing law at that time. So
What
He was
drew you to come
he's a
to
judge
Northern
now.
Kentucky?
Private practice.
yes.
What drew you to Northern Kentucky and said, this is where I want to come and this is what I want to do? I mean, it's a long way from Dawson Springs
Yes, it
to
is.
Chase Law School. More than metaphorically, it's a long way from there, but also it's distance
Right.
a long way. Suddenly you're coming up here.
Yeah, well, I just only applied to law schools, and I got accepted at Chase. I don't think I got accepted at UK. And so I decided I'd try, and I came up. And the craziest thing is to be a quad and to move 300 miles from anybody you know. And my brother-in-law told me my mom and my sister, the day they left me up there, they cried all the way home because, you know, it's one thing that's good when you're young and you just don't know how to appreciate all the danger. Because, I mean, being 300 miles from even knowing anyone, you know, but
that's tough for a kid going to law school, no matter if they're in a wheelchair or not. And suddenly you're going
right.
in, and again, pre-ADA, pre the American Disabilities Act. I know the old buildings. I remember the old buildings. They were not easy to get around in.
No,
So along with everything else, you got to deal with not only going through your first Socratic method interview of Carol Eisenbard for real estate. Now you've got to sit back and you've got to figure out how to get into the room, right?
Absolutely. But Carol Eisenbard was a great teacher, though, just for the record. But yes,
I'm a lawyer today because of Carol Eisenbard. The reason I bring that up, I'm a lawyer today because of her.
She's wonderful. I wish I could say all of my law professors were wonderful. I can't really say that, but she was. She was.
So then let's give the rest of the story. We got a few minutes. Rob, by the way, Rick Dollar says hi. He's watching.
Hey, Rick. Rick's down in Georgia.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
So you get out of law school. What are you going to do with this now? How do you decide it? How do you sit back? I mean, when you come out of law school, you're still trying to figure out, you know, where the clerk's office is and how do you file your first motion, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
how do you decide to, and I think you end up first off in the ideal practice for you, as it turns out. How did you tell everybody about what you practice and how you got there?
Well, basically, I was so busy trying to get through, I didn't think about when I made it until I made it. So I wasn't even thinking about how I'm going to practice until the last year. And because I got the JD MBA, I was in MBA classes a lot as well at the end. So then I started looking at my classmates, and there weren't many law jobs available. So I didn't apply to many because I knew the truth is you need to be a good golfer the first year you're practicing, and quadriplegics don't make good golfers. So I just, I hung out of shingles, and here I am, world, used my one finger, and I typed master template documents for the day when I would have clients. So for the first year, it was lean.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a struggle to get out of law school for, as I say, for any young person, let alone to be in a chair. You become a very successful lawyer. You become somebody who this community looks up to and looks to for guidance, and with a lot of clients, a wonderful base. Before we go to some questions here, I do want to say this is more than just a happy ending for Ron Adams. Tell me about your family.
Well, excuse me, I'm married. I have a great wife, 2 children, and I may have grown up poor, but now I have a nice home and pretty much everything, excuse me, everything that everybody wants. Everybody wants in life, I was able to live and get my share, even though the doctors had said I'd never be able to do any of it. So
Somebody picks up a copy of this book, reads it. Even before they pick it up, they walk into a suspension press down in Covington. They walk into any store that they say, they go online, they go to Headline Books. What do you want somebody to get out of this book? This is more than the Ron Adams story. It really is. I mean, that's what I love about this book, is that it has a lesson for everybody. But as you sit here today, talking with Rick and Fred, why do you want somebody to pick up this book? What do you want them to get out of it?
I want them to see that everything is possible as long as you don't quit, because in sports, you get down to the last 2 minutes of the game. In life, you don't know when it's over. So if you will just keep picking up one foot and foot in front of the other, metaphorically, you can get anywhere if you just don't dwell on the short frustrations and dwell on the long vision that you're trying to get somewhere that maybe you've not been, but just don't take yourself off the playing field. And as long as you try and you never quit, I'm living proof. I'm a 35-year overnight success. So you can do it. Anybody can do it.
Hey, real quick, I got one final question. That's the big closer. That everybody's going to wait to hear. But first off, tell everybody, Fred, Ron, give everybody how we can get in touch with everybody. Go to headlinebooks.com, or tell us how we can get a copy, or how somebody can get in touch with you if they want to talk to you about about your story or about maybe how the book has inspired them.
Okay. Well, you can go to my law website, wronadamslaw.com. And if you go there, then you can pick the tab and either order the book through Amazon, or you can order it directly from me and I will personalize it and send it to you. And or if you
Not
just
mine
want to
autograph.
ask me something, yeah, if you just want to ask me something, you don't have to buy a book. I didn't write the book to make money. I wrote the book to make a difference. So
That's and I tell you what, after reading it, you've made a difference in my life. It's going to make a difference in the lives of the people that read this. Fred Anderson, you did a wonderful job at assisting Ron in putting this to paper. Again, you were able to keep your voice out of it and capture Ron's perfectly, and do it in such a way again that it wasn't something that was overwhelming on the problems in his life, but really came forth and showed his faith, his inspiration, his perseverance. Again, this is not a biography. This is a how-to book. This is how to live. And that's what I love about this book. Final question, most important question. UK basketball this year, what's going to happen, Ron? Are we going to have some senior leadership? What's going to happen?
well, we just lost another one to the portal transfer thing. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm hopeful that we're going to have a good team next year, but right now we seem to get in a good kid or two and lose a good kid or two. So I'm optimistic though.
Hey, Fred, where are you going next? I know you guys have had a very aggressive book signing tour. Where are you going next?
Our next book signing will take place next Saturday, May 7th at Bobby's Hallmark and Read More Books in Madisonville, Kentucky, which is in Hopkins County. It's real close to Dawson Springs, where Ron.
I was going to say you're down in Ron's home country down there. I'm sure you're going to have a good crowd.
That's right. We've heard from quite a few people who knew Ron back in the day and are still friends with him who think we're going to show up. But yeah, that's going to be at Bobby's Hallmark and Read More Bookstore. It's all the same.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be from 1 until 3 o'clock, or however long people want Ron to stick around. But it'll start at 1 o'clock Central Time in Madisonville.
Got to be over by the Derby by call to the post. Got to be over by call to the post, Ron.
I have a feeling.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Hey, thanks again for everybody being here today, for being a part. I should ask Kathy, do we let me bring Kathy back in real quick, our publisher. Kathy, do we have any questions that have come in while we're here?
No, you've answered them all. You all did a great job.
Well, I saw that they've been popping up on the side of my screen here, so I've tried to work them into the conversation and into the questions. Once again, thanks to everybody for being here. I'm Rick Robinson. My guest, Fred Anderson, Ron Adams, my publisher, Kathy Teeth. This has been wonderful talking to everybody. Ron, I love the book. Folks, you've got to buy this book. This will make a difference in your life. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for being Zoom Into Books. Fred's still pushing my books there. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for being in Zoom Into Books, and check out headlinebooks.com. Ron Adams, love you, babe. We will see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.